Right, so what we want to do now is we're going to create the standby database. So I've clicked on Create Standby Database from the main screen, and now I'm going to select my DDC file, Dbvisit, and we're going to do a few checks. So behind the scenes, it's doing a few checks. It's connecting through to the standby system, getting some information, and it detects that we're creating a new database. So there's no template yet, there's no old running systems. We're going to create a new database. And I'm now going to just review my settings, and I can see all the SP file settings is there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the settings as it is. And it's important here, you'll see that the online log destination is set. We can also see, where is it? Our recovery area is set. And there we go. Just above it is the DB create file destination. And that matches up with our storage location for the specific database that we've created, which is perfect. That's excellent. That's exactly what we want. All the other values, you can review it and make adjustments if needed, for example, memory or anything like that. But ideally, in most environments, you want the primary and standby to match, to be the same. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to say, create the standby database, use the temporary location for the backups. So I'm just going to click on Submit. And this will now submit and create an active task that will start the creation process for the standby database. As you can see there, the active task has popped up. It's running some pre-flight checks now, and you can hover over it and get updates, or you can click on it and just wait there and you'll see the updates coming through. As we can see now, it is busy with the backup process. So the first thing is it's backing up the primary database. It's using RMAN compressed backups. So that even though the database size is just over 3 gigabytes, this is just a small database to show you the process, and it backs up all the data files first to local disk, it then transfers it through to the standby system, and then it will restore it from that side. As we can see there now, what it's doing is it's finished the backup, it then transferred all the backups through to the standby system, and now it starts creating the standby database, and it's busy restoring data file 1. And if we navigate through to the system, we just have a quick look and see which processes are running, we will see that our standby database is now being started. So as you can see there now, we're getting to the end of the process where the data files are being restored on the standby system. We can see there was 10 data files in total, and if we just go down, we'll see it's now busy at data file 8. So it's getting close to finishing the restore or the creation of the standby database on our second ODA machine. And the refresh is just because I haven't actually clicked on the browser for some time. Right, as we can see now, the creation of the standby database is finished. We've backed up the files, copied it through to the standby, restored it, and we now have a successfully created standby database on the standby system, which is running an ODA machine. So the next step we want to do is, after creating a standby database, is first to just ship some logs from the standby to the primary and apply those logs. And we can do that either through the central console and click on Sending Logs, which will create a new task, and the task will be to ship archive logs from the primary through to the standby. And if we have a look at that, we can see that this is a fairly newly created environment. So that's just sequence 2. So it's fairly early on. And if we go, we want to apply the logs, it's going to apply the logs through to the standby. Now, as we can see there, that's a fairly quick task. The task was applied. So now we know our primary and standby is up to date. So we've successfully now created a standby database between 2 ODA machines running 12.102. And as we can see there, it's all in place. Everything is up to date. So what we want to do now is, now that I do have my standby database created, you will notice that if you run the ODA CLI list databases command, that our database is not listed yet because it's not registered yet. So what we need to do next is we need to register the database. Now, before we can do that, there's a few things to keep in mind. we need to make sure that this database is accessible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the database into our tnsnames.ora file. So I'm just going to go Oracle home. Oh, let's first set the home. So we go Dbvisit, just in case it's using a different home. And let's have a quick look at the tnsnames file. We go back to the bottom, and let's quickly just copy that one, and we can just modify it. So I'm just going to quickly do that. And I'm just going to update the service name. Right. So I've done that now. But the next step we want to do is we now want to use, as the root user on our ODA machine, which is running the standby database, we want to run the register database command to register this database so that the toolset knows about it. So we do ODA CLI register database -coltp. I'm not going to go into the details of this command. You can go, and if you just run, let me show you the help. If you just do -h, you'll get the help for this command, and you can then see the details for it. So I'm just going to type in the details, -coltp -sodb1 -sndbv8 in this case, -p, which is just to specify this as password. Right, so if we just have a quick look through that, it's just showing that the class is OLTP because it's standard edition. If we look at -s, which is the database shape, it's an ODB1, so that's the shape, and then SN is our service name. So we just specify a service name, which is Dbv8, and -p is just the sys password. And it asks us for the password now, and we type that in, and let's hope I typed it in correct. Oh yes, there's one thing I need to, so when you get this, what we need to do is, because it's a standby database, it's currently in recovery mode, and what we need to do is we actually, to continue with the next step, we need to take this database and put it in read-only mode. So let's quickly do that. So we connect through SQL+, alter database, open read-only. Whoops. And we'll just exit out of that, and let's run the command again. Right, so now we can see successfully it started another job for us, and this job will now register this database with the ODA toolset. So what we're going to do now is just run ODA CLI list jobs, just so that you can see that there is a new job created. And we can see the last one there, the database registration, and it's running, and that's the specific job. So if we do ODA CLI describe job -i, and we give it that specific job ID, we can see the details of the job as it's running. And we can now see the steps of what it's doing. And we can see that it's busy going through a few steps as part of registering the database with the ODA toolset. So we can keep running that. That might take a little bit of time for it to finish. So let's wait for that. What we can see now while we wait for that is if we do ODA CLI list databases, we will see that the database is there, but it's got a status of creating. And once all these tasks are finished successfully, we will see the creating moves on to configured. And that's important. If it stays on creating, you have to review the tasks and make sure that none of these tasks actually failed. Because if they failed, the status will stay in a creating state. And you will then have to see why it failed and then fix that before you can run it again. And if you run it again, it will just change the status from creating to configured once it's finished. So if we just list that again. Great, so we can see now that our database is listed. It's part of the toolset. It's now configured. So we've now successfully created a standby database using Dbvisit standby version 8 from one ODA machine to another ODA machine. And what we've done is we've registered the database. So we can see it through the ODA CLI command line utility. And we can see that the database is now configured and registered.